The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars. It was bigger than most moons and home to the Galactic Council. Today, something important was happening. Representatives from 12 different alien species had gathered in the Great Hall. The air buzzed with tension and worry. Ambassador Kethavar stood at the center of the room. His body looked like it was made of blue crystal that glowed from within. His people, the Zephyrians, were known for being calm and logical. But today Kethavar was anything but calm. His crystal form pulsed with bright, angry light. "The humans have broken the treaty," he announced to the assembled aliens. His voice echoed through the chamber like broken glass. "They have left their home system. They are exploring space." A hologram appeared above his head. It showed a small human spaceship moving past the edge of their solar system. The ship looked primitive compared to the sleek vessels of the council races. It had rough metal sides and simple engines that burned chemical fuel. The other ambassadors began talking at once. The Vorthak delegation hissed through their reptilian mouths. The hive queen of the insectoid Chitauri clicked her mandibles in agitation. The gaseous ethereals swirled in their containment fields, their thoughts creating ripples of color. "Silence," Kethavar commanded. The room fell quiet. "For 3,000 years we have honored the Terran Isolation Treaty. We agreed to leave the humans alone on their little blue world. We promised not to contact them or interfere with their development. In return, they were supposed to stay in their system." An elderly ethereal floated forward. High Counselor Thane was the oldest being in the chamber. His transparent, cloud-like body flickered with ancient memories. When he spoke, his voice was like wind through hollow reeds. "Perhaps we should think carefully about this," Thane said slowly. "The treaty was made for important reasons. Our ancestors had good cause to—" "Our ancestors were fools," interrupted General Vexhai, the Vorthak military commander. His scales were dark green and covered in battle scars. They were afraid of primitives who barely had fire. "Look at them now." He gestured at the hologram. 3,000 years later, and they still use chemical rockets. They are no threat to anyone. Many of the younger council members nodded in agreement. The stories about humans were old legends that few believed anymore. Tales of a species so dangerous that the entire galaxy had to work together to contain them. It seemed impossible now looking at their crude technology. But Thane remembered. He was old enough to have spoken with those who had been there. "The humans were different," he whispered. "Not because of their machines, but because of how they thought. How they fought." How they what?" Kethavar demanded. "Threw rocks? Used sharp sticks? Counselor, you speak in riddles. These humans cannot even travel faster than light. They pose no threat to the great powers of the galaxy." The debate continued for hours. Some of the older aliens tried to urge caution, but their voices were drowned out by the younger generation's confidence. The galaxy had grown strong in 3,000 years. New weapons, new ships, new technologies that the ancient humans could never imagine. Finally, a vote was called. The result was clear. 12 species voted for war. Only Thane abstained, floating in worried silence. "The Terran Isolation Treaty is hereby void," Kethavar announced. "We will send a message to Earth. They have 30 rotations to return to their system and never leave again. If they refuse, we will destroy them." The council began to disperse, already making plans for the military action. It would be simple, they thought. A few dozen ships could easily handle one primitive world. Some suggested they might keep a few humans alive as curiosities for their zoos. But far away, on the edge of human space, Captain Sarah Chen was having the worst day of her career. Chen commanded the exploration ship Endeavour, humanity's first vessel designed for long-range space travel. It was not much to look at, a collection of metal tubes and habitation pods held together by determination and prayer. But it had taken humanity to the stars for the first time in their recorded history. Chen floated in the ship's small command center, looking at data streams from their passive sensors. As a precaution, they had been monitoring all electromagnetic signals from nearby star systems. Most were natural, radiation from stars, magnetic fields from planets. But some were clearly artificial. "Captain," called Lieutenant Morrison from the communication station, "I'm picking up something strange. It's a focused transmission, very powerful, and it's in multiple languages." "Put it through the translation computer," Chen ordered. The ship's artificial intelligence had been programmed with every human language, along with theoretical models for how alien languages might work. Minutes passed. Then the computer began displaying text on the main screen. Chen read the first few lines and felt her blood turn cold. The message was a recording of the Galactic Council session. Everything. The vote for war. The 30-day ultimatum. The casual discussion of humanity's destruction. Lieutenant, Chen said quietly, send a quantum burst transmission to Earth. Priority Alpha. Morrison's face went pale. Priority Alpha was reserved for threats to human civilization. It had never been used before. Message as follows, Chen continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. To Earth Command. The galaxy knows we are here. We are not alone and we are not welcome. Multiple hostile alien species exist. They have declared war on humanity. Estimated time to Earth. Unknown but soon. As the message flashed toward home at faster-than-light speeds, Chen looked out at the stars. They seemed different now. Not the friendly lights of exploration and wonder that had drawn humanity into space, but the eyes of predators in the dark. Captain, Morrison said softly, what do we do now? Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and something in that smile would have worried the aliens if they could have seen it. It was not the smile of fear or desperation. It was the smile of someone who had just been handed a very interesting puzzle. We do what humans do best, Lieutenant, she said. We survive. And we make sure our enemies regret underestimating us. She turned to address the rest of her small crew. All hands, this is the captain. We've just learned that we're about to be at war with most of the galaxy. They think we're primitive. They think we're weak. They think 3,000 years of isolation has made us soft. The crew listened in tense silence. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Chen continued. But first, we need to get home. Plot a course for Earth, best possible speed, and monitor all channels. I want to know everything about these aliens before we meet them in battle. As the Endeavour turned toward home, its engines burning bright in the cosmic dark, Chen felt something strange. A tingling at the back of her mind like a half-remembered dream. Images flashed through her thoughts. Vast battles among the stars, weapons that tore reality apart, and humans fighting with a skill that seemed impossible. She shook her head, dismissing the strange thoughts as stress. But deep in her genetic code, something ancient was beginning to wake up. The galaxy had declared war on humanity, thinking they faced primitive savages with chemical rockets. They had no idea they were about to meet their oldest nightmare made flesh. The 3,000-year truce was over, and humanity was about to remember who they used to be. Captain Chen's message reached Earth 18 hours after the Galactic Council's declaration of war. The response was immediate and terrifying. Around the world, things that had been sleeping for 3,000 years began to wake up. In the Sahara Desert, tourists watching the sunrise noticed something impossible. The sand dunes were moving in perfect geometric patterns. Ancient structures rose from beneath centuries of accumulated sand. Black metal pyramids covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. The structures hummed with power that made the air itself vibrate. In Antarctica, research stations reported that entire ice shelves were cracking and falling away, revealing massive installations beneath. The structures looked nothing like human architecture. They were too perfect, too advanced, made from materials that shouldn't exist. Deep in the Pacific Ocean, sonar operators detected something that made them question their sanity. Cities were rising from the deepest trenches, shedding water like awakening giants. The cities glowed with their own light, and their signals could be detected from space. But nowhere was the change more dramatic than in a complex buried deep beneath NORAD. The North American Air Defense Command, General Marcus Webb, stood in a room that hadn't existed the day before, staring at displays that showed detailed maps of the entire galaxy. Sir, Lieutenant Torres said, his voice shaking. I don't understand any of this. Yesterday this room was solid rock. Today it's here, and these computers know things about alien worlds that we've never even heard of. Webb nodded grimly. He was one of the few people on Earth who had access to certain classified files that had been dismissed as fiction by most who read them. It's all real, Lieutenant. The old stories, the legends, the cave paintings that archaeologists could never explain. All of it. The displays around them showed ship designs that were centuries ahead of anything humanity should be able to build. Weapon systems that manipulated gravity and time. Star charts with detailed notes about alien homeworlds, their military capabilities, and their weaknesses. But how is this possible? Torres asked. Where did all this technology come from? It's ours, Webb said simply. It was always ours. We just forgot. Across the world, similar scenes played out. Museums that had displayed ancient artifacts as art or religious objects watched in amazement as those same objects came to life. Statues began to move, tracking something in the sky. Cave paintings glowed with inner light, revealing themselves as technical diagrams and tactical manuals. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent 20 years studying what she thought were primitive cave paintings in South America. She stood in her laboratory now, watching those same paintings project three-dimensional holographic displays into the air above them. This is impossible, she whispered to herself, but the evidence was right in front of her eyes. The painting showed humans in advanced armor, fighting alongside weapons that defied physics against creatures that matched the alien species in Captain Chen's transmission perfectly. These weren't mythological drawings, they were historical records. Her computer beeped with an incoming message from colleagues around the world. Similar discoveries were being made everywhere. Ancient sites were revealing their true nature as camouflaged military installations. Artifacts were powering up for the first time in millennia. Meanwhile, in space, the first alien scout ships arrived at the edge of the solar system, expecting to find a primitive species cowering in fear. Instead, they found a minefield. Commander Zalteth of the Vorthak Advance Force studied his sensors in confusion. His long-range scanners showed thousands of objects floating in the void around Pluto's orbit. They were small, no larger than shuttlecraft, but they radiated energy signatures that his instruments couldn't identify. Are those weapons? His tactical officer asked. I don't know, Zalteth admitted. They don't match any known technology, but they're clearly artificial. The commander made a decision that would haunt the survivors of his fleet for the rest of their lives. All ships, advance formation. We'll destroy whatever these primitive traps are and proceed to Earth. The first Vorthak ship to enter the minefield simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there. A kilometer-long battlecruiser armed with weapons that could crack moons. The next moment there was nothing but empty space where it had been. Report, Zalteth shouted. Unknown, sir. The ship just disappeared. No explosion, no debris, no energy discharge. It's just gone. The second ship tried to back away, but space itself seemed to twist around it. The massive vessel was crushed into a point of light no bigger than a marble. Then that light winked out. Retreat, Zalteth ordered, but it was too late. The minefield was activating. Reality warped and twisted around the alien ships. Some were pulled into dimensional pockets that folded them out of existence. Others found themselves aging centuries in seconds, their hulls crumbling to dust. A few lucky ones were merely thrown backward at velocities that should have liquefied their crews. Of the 50 ships that had entered the solar system, only 5 escaped to carry the news back to the main fleet. Zalteth, badly injured and traumatized, managed to send one last transmission before his damaged ship lost power. They were ready for us. The humans were ready for us. How were they ready for us? Back on Earth, Webb watched the tactical display as the alien survivors limped away from the solar system. Phase 1 complete, he announced to his staff. The outer perimeter held. Sir, Torres asked, what's Phase 2? Webb's smile was cold and predatory. Phase 2 is when they send their main fleet, and Phase 2 is when they learn that humanity doesn't just defend. He looked up at the display showing alien fleet movements. We hunt. Around the world, the awakening continued. Ordinary people found themselves remembering things they had never learned. A mechanic in Detroit suddenly understood how to build engines that could fold space. A teacher in Tokyo found herself drawing diagrams for weapons that manipulated quantum fields. Children played games that were actually military training exercises from a forgotten age. The change wasn't just technological, it was genetic. Dormant sections of human DNA were activating, unlocking memories and abilities that had been locked away for 3,000 years. Humanity was remembering not just how to fight, but how to fight in ways that would terrify gods. Captain Chen's ship, the Endeavour, was racing home when her crew began to change as well. Lieutenant Morrison, who had never shown any mechanical aptitude, suddenly understood their ship's systems better than the chief engineer. The navigation officer started plotting courses using mathematics that hadn't been invented yet, and Chen herself found that she could predict enemy movements with an accuracy that should have been impossible. When she looked at the star charts, she didn't just see where the alien fleets were. She knew where they would be. "Captain," Morrison said during one of their planning sessions, "I've been having these dreams. Battles in space, ships I've never seen, tactics that shouldn't work but do. And in all of them, we're not the defenders, we're the ones everyone else is afraid of." Chen nodded. She'd been having the same dreams. "I think they're not dreams, Lieutenant. I think they're memories. Genetic memories that are being unlocked." She stood and looked out at the stars rushing past their ship. "The aliens think they're attacking a young species that's never seen war. They have no idea they're about to face the galaxy's most experienced soldiers." As Earth's defenses continued to awaken and humanity's true nature began to surface, the alien fleets massed at the edge of the solar system. They came in their thousands, confident in their superior technology and numbers. They had no way of knowing that they were about to fight a war against an enemy that had been preparing for this moment for 3,000 years, even if they didn't remember it until now. The sleeping giant was awake, and it was very, very angry. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and felt confident about the coming battle. Around him, 40,000 ships from 12 different species formed the largest military force the galaxy had seen in over a millennium. The human solar system lay ahead of them, a small collection of planets orbiting an ordinary yellow star. Intelligence reports indicated that Earth had a population of about 8 billion humans, with basic nuclear technology and primitive space travel. It should be an easy conquest. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting approximately 200 human vessels in the outer system. They appear to be antiques, sir. Chemical propulsion, metal hulls, very basic designs." Kethvar nodded. "As expected. Begin the standard invasion protocol. Heavy bombardment of military targets, followed by occupation forces. We'll be done here in a few hours." But as the alien fleet moved into the solar system, something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't retreat or surrender. Instead, they spread out in patterns that made no tactical sense, until the first shots were fired. Commander Sarah Chen, now in charge of Earth's hastily assembled space fleet, watched the alien formations on her tactical display. The memories that had been awakening in her mind over the past weeks suddenly clicked into place like puzzle pieces finding their homes. "All ships," she broadcast on the fleet frequency, "remember who we are. Remember what we do to those who threaten our home." The battle began at Saturn. The aliens approached in perfect formation, their energy weapons charging for a devastating first strike. But the human ships did something that broke every rule of space combat. They dove directly into Saturn's rings. "Sir," the Vorthak commander Zexhai reported to Kethvar, "the humans have taken positions in the planetary debris. They're using the ring particles as cover." "Then blast them out," Kethvar ordered. "Fire at will." The alien weapons lit up space with beams of pure energy, each shot powerful enough to vaporize a city. But the humans weren't where the targeting computers said they should be. They used Saturn's gravity to slingshot around debris, making impossible turns and changes of direction. Then the humans began to fight back, and everything went wrong for the aliens. A human ship, barely 100 meters long, rammed into the side of a Chitauri dreadnought that was 10 times its size. Both ships should have been destroyed in the collision. Instead, the human vessel somehow survived, its crew using the impact to board the alien ship. "Impossible," Zexhai shouted. "No biological form can survive those impact forces." But humans weren't like other species. While the aliens had spent millennia developing better technology, humans had been unknowingly developing themselves. Their bodies could withstand pressures and impacts that would kill any other race. Their minds could process information and make decisions faster than alien computers. More disturbing still was how they fought. Where other species would retreat after taking damage, humans became more dangerous. Where other species followed predictable tactics, humans did things that seemed insane but worked perfectly. A group of human fighters surrounded a Zephyrian cruiser. Instead of attacking its weapons or engines, they targeted the ship's waste disposal systems. Within minutes, the cruiser was disabled by its own recycling failure, forcing the crew to evacuate. "They're not fighting like a military force," Zexhai reported, his voice filled with growing panic. "They're fighting like artists. Every engagement is different, unpredictable." That was exactly right. Human ships carried more than just soldiers. They had musicians, painters, writers, and philosophers alongside their warriors. Because humanity had learned something that the galaxy had forgotten. Creativity was the ultimate weapon. Admiral Chen's flagship engaged 3 alien battleships at once. Instead of trying to outgun them, she used Saturn's magnetic field to create an electromagnetic pulse that disabled their shields. Then her crew, somehow knowing exactly how alien systems worked, boarded all 3 ships simultaneously. How do they know our technology? One ethereal commander gasped as human boarding parties tore through his ship's defenses. Our systems are classified beyond their technology level. But humans weren't learning alien technology. They were remembering it. 3,000 years ago, they had fought these same species, captured their ships, and learned their weaknesses. That knowledge had been buried in their genetic memory, waiting for the moment it would be needed again. The tide of battle turned when the humans stopped defending and started attacking. Captain Morrison, serving on a destroyer called the Defiant, watched his crew work with deadly efficiency. His weapons officer, a former kindergarten teacher named Lisa Park, was targeting alien ships with accuracy that their computers couldn't match. "Captain," she reported, "I'm detecting a command ship in Grid 7. If we can disable it, their entire formation will lose coordination." Morrison nodded. "Do it. All power to forward guns." The Defiant streaked across space, dodging alien fire with movements that seemed to defy physics. But humans had always been good at the impossible. They just hadn't remembered how good until now. The alien command ship was massive, protected by shields that could stop nuclear weapons. Park's shot shouldn't have even scratched its armor. Instead, it punched through the shields and struck the one vulnerable spot that could disable the entire vessel. "Lucky shot," Park muttered. But Morrison knew better. It wasn't luck. It was 3,000 years of buried expertise finally surfacing. By the time the battle was over, the alien invasion force was shattered. Of the 40,000 ships that had entered the system, less than half remained combat-ready. They had faced 200 human vessels and lost, but more troubling than the defeat was how the humans had fought. They hadn't just defended their home. They had turned the entire solar system into a weapon. They used gravity, magnetic fields, radiation, and even solar wind as tools of war. Admiral Kethvar stood in his damaged command center, staring at the tactical display in shock. "What are they?" he whispered. His aide, a young Zephyrian who had never seen combat before, was trembling. "Sir, the survivors are reporting the same thing from every engagement. The humans fought like they had done this before. Like they knew our ships, our weapons, our tactics." Kethvar nodded slowly. Ancient memories were stirring in his own mind now. Stories his grandmother had told him about the old wars, the ones they weren't supposed to talk about. "Send a message to High Counselor Thane," he ordered. "Tell him we need to talk." On Earth, General Webb watched the alien fleet retreating to the outer system. The immediate threat was over, but he knew this was just the beginning. "Sir," Lieutenant Torres asked, "what happens now? Will they give up and go home?" Webb shook his head. "No. Now they'll go back to their leaders and report what happened here. And then those leaders will remember stories they thought were myths." He turned to look at his aide. "The galaxy is about to remember why they were afraid of us in the first place." Across Earth, the awakening continued. Humans everywhere found themselves changing, remembering, becoming something more than they had been. In small towns and great cities, people looked up at the stars with new understanding. They weren't alone in the universe, and they never had been. They were the descendants of the galaxy's greatest warriors, and it was time to reclaim their birthright. The 3,000-year truce was over, and humanity was ready for whatever came next. High Counselor Thane arrived at the solar system 3 days after the battle, flying alone in his personal ship under a flag of truce. The ancient ethereal had not slept since receiving Admiral Kethvar's desperate message. The memories he had tried to forget for 3,000 years were flooding back with terrifying clarity. The human fleet met him at the edge of their territory, not to attack, but to escort. Thane studied the ships surrounding him as they guided him toward Earth. They looked different than they had during the battle. Sleeker, more advanced, as if the humans were rebuilding their technology even as he watched. Earth itself had changed dramatically. Where once there had been a simple blue and green world with primitive cities, now there were massive orbital platforms, defensive satellites, and structures that shouldn't have been possible with human technology. But they knew the truth. This wasn't new construction. It was remembering. The meeting took place on a neutral station hastily built in Earth's orbit. Thane floated into the conference room to find 3 humans waiting for him. President Martinez, a woman with steel-gray hair and tired eyes. General Webb, whose military bearing reminded Thane uncomfortably of warriors from the old times. And Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose archaeological work had apparently become much more relevant than she had ever expected. Counselor Thane, President Martinez began. Thank you for coming. We have much to discuss. Thane's gaseous form flickered with uncertainty. I must know, he said without preamble. How much do you remember? Dr. Vasquez activated a holographic display that filled the room. It showed archaeological sites from across Earth, but now the true meaning of the artifacts was clear. Cave paintings revealed themselves as tactical manuals. Ancient statues were actually sensor arrays. Mysterious stone circles were the remains of defensive installations. We remember enough, Vasquez said quietly. The genetic triggers activated when your people declared war on us. 3,000 years of suppressed memories are returning to our entire species. The hologram changed to show star charts, detailed maps of the galaxy with notations about alien homeworlds, military capabilities and tactical assessments, information that should have been impossible for humans to possess. The question, General Webb added, is how much you remember, Counselor. How much of the truth has your people forgotten? Thane's form shuddered. We tried to forget everything. The Purging Wars, the Crimson Nebula campaigns, the species that simply vanished. We told ourselves they were myths, legends meant to frighten children. President Martinez leaned forward. Tell us about the Reapers, Counselor. The word hit Thane like a physical blow. His gaseous body contracted in fear. Where did you hear that name? It's what you called us, isn't it? Martinez continued relentlessly. Before the treaty, before the exile, before you convinced us to give up our memories and start over on this little world. The room fell silent. Thane floated motionless for long minutes, his form flickering through colors that humans were learning to recognize as deep emotional distress. You were the most terrifying force the galaxy had ever seen, he whispered finally. Not because of your technology. Many species had better weapons than yours. You were terrifying because of how you thought, how you fought, how you turned every disadvantage into a weapon. The holographic display changed again, showing ancient battle records, scenes of human ships outnumbered 1,000 to 1, yet somehow winning through tactics that seemed impossible, humans using their enemies' own strengths against them, turning superior alien technology into traps and weapons. The siege of Kepler 442, Thane continued, his voice filled with ancient horror. 50 billion Vorthak warriors, the finest military force in the galaxy. They surrounded one human colony world with 10,000 ships. The humans had maybe 100 defenders. What happened? Webb asked, though something in his expression suggested he already knew. The humans won, Thane said simply. They didn't just survive, they destroyed the entire Vorthak fleet. And then they took the enemy ships and used them to attack 3 Vorthak homeworlds simultaneously. Dr. Vasquez was taking notes, but her hands were shaking. How is that possible? Because humans don't fight like other species, Thane explained. Other races develop better weapons, stronger armor, more efficient engines. Humans develop better warriors. You made yourselves into living weapons. The display showed medical scans, human bodies that could survive in vacuum for minutes, bones that could withstand impacts that would shatter steel, nervous systems that could process information faster than most computers. You evolved yourselves, Thane continued. Not through technology, but through will. Each generation of humans became stronger, faster, smarter than the last. And you did it all while fighting wars that should have destroyed you. President Martinez stood and walked to the window, looking out at Earth. But we were still human, she said. We still had families, art, music, love. The warrior evolution was just one part of who we were. That's what made you so frightening, Thane admitted. A species of pure warriors can be understood, predicted, defeated. But humans, you would write poetry between battles, compose symphonies while planning sieges, create works of art that celebrated both life and death. You were impossible to understand, which made you impossible to fight. General Webb accessed his personal files, displaying records that had been declassified only days ago. Project Tabula Rasa, he said. That was the formal name for the memory wipe, wasn't it? Thane nodded. Your own leaders proposed it. They were afraid of what humanity was becoming. The constant warfare was changing you in ways that frightened even yourselves. The record showed the negotiations, ancient, human leaders working with the Galactic Council to find a way to break the cycle of violence that had consumed the galaxy for centuries. We offered you this world, Thane explained. Earth, a garden planet far from the center of galactic civilization. In exchange, your people would undergo genetic modification to suppress their warrior memories and instincts. You could start fresh, become something new. But you kept safeguards, Vasquez observed. The genetic triggers that would restore our memories if we were ever threatened with extinction. That was insisted upon by your negotiators, Thane said. They refused to leave humanity completely defenseless. The suppression was designed to reverse itself if your species faced annihilation. The room fell quiet again as the implications sank in. Humanity's peaceful development, their art and culture and philosophy, had all been built on a foundation of forgotten warfare. So what happens now? President Martinez asked. The galaxy has declared war on us. Our people are remembering who we used to be. And frankly, Counselor, some of what we're remembering is not pleasant. Thane's form brightened with something that might have been hope. That is why I came here personally. The Council acts out of fear and ignorance, but there may still be time to prevent a return to the old wars. He manipulated the holographic display, showing current galactic political maps. The galaxy has changed in 3,000 years. New species have risen, old alliances have shifted, but the fundamental truth remains the same. In a direct conflict, humanity will win. Even against the entire galaxy? Webb asked. Especially against the entire galaxy, Thane replied grimly. United enemies are predictable enemies, and humans have always been at their best when the odds were impossible. Dr. Vasquez was studying the ancient battle records. There's something else, isn't there? Something you haven't told us about why the other species are so afraid. Thane's form flickered with what humans were learning to recognize as shame. The Zeta Reticuli incident, he said quietly. Even with their recovered memories, the humans had to search their genetic archives to find the reference. When they did, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. An entire star system, Martinez whispered. You're saying we made it uninhabitable, Thane confirmed. Not through weapons or violence, but through strategic brilliance. Humanity convinced 37 different species to attack a single Zeta Reticuli colony world. When they arrived, they found that the humans had already left, and that the humans had spent 2 years preparing the star itself as a trap. When the combined fleet entered the system, the star went supernova. 37 fleets representing nearly half the galaxy's military might were destroyed in minutes. The silence stretched on for a very long time. Finally, President Martinez spoke. Counselor, humanity has spent 3,000 years learning to be something other than warriors. We've developed art, philosophy, compassion. We don't want to return to the old ways. But, Thane prompted, but if the galaxy wants a war, Martinez continued, her voice hard as steel, they'll get one, and they'll lose. Thane floated toward the window, looking out at the orbital installations that were still growing around Earth. Then perhaps it is time for the galaxy to remember why they chose peace instead of war 3,000 years ago. The meeting ended with an ultimatum that would reshape galactic civilization. Humanity would give the galaxy one chance to withdraw their declaration of war and return to peaceful coexistence. If they refused, the descendants of the Reapers would remind the universe why they had once been the most feared warriors in known space. 6 months had passed since the failed alien invasion of Earth, and the galaxy was discovering that humanity's return to the galactic stage was nothing like what they had expected. The first sign that things had changed came when human medical ships began appearing at plague-stricken worlds across the Outer Rim territories. The ship crews wore simple white uniforms marked with red crosses, an ancient symbol that none of the alien species recognized but somehow found comforting. On the Chitauri colony world of Hive 7, a bacterial infection had been killing millions of the insect-like beings. Their own medical science was advanced, but the disease seemed to adapt to every treatment they tried. Then a human hospital ship called the Mercy arrived in orbit. Dr. Jennifer Walsh beamed down to the planet's surface with a team of 20 human medics. The local Chitauri doctors watched in amazement as the humans not only cured the plague within days but left behind manufacturing instructions for a vaccine that would prevent future outbreaks. "Why do you help us?" asked Chief Medical Drone Ziktar. "Our people voted for war against yours." Dr. Walsh smiled as she prepared to return to her ship. "Because people are sick and we're doctors. It's what we do." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human engineers solved infrastructure problems that had plagued worlds for centuries. Human agricultural specialists helped struggling colonies develop sustainable farming methods. Human teachers established schools on frontier worlds where education had never been available. But it was the human military advisors that truly unsettled the galactic powers. General Vexai of the Vorthak military had spent 40 years fighting a border war against the ethereal Confederacy. Both sides were locked in a stalemate that had cost millions of lives and drained their economies. Then a human officer named Colonel Martinez arrived with an offer of assistance. "We can end your war in 6 weeks," Martinez told the assembled Vorthak commanders. "No more casualties on either side." The Vorthak generals laughed. This was a conflict that had raged for decades, involving hundreds of star systems and millions of soldiers. How could one human possibly understand it better than they did? 3 weeks later, Vexai stood in his command center, staring at tactical displays that showed something impossible. The war was over, not through conquest or surrender, but through a series of strategic moves so elegant and unexpected that both sides had found themselves with no choice but to negotiate. Martinez had identified 17 key supply lines that both armies depended on. Instead of attacking them, the humans had improved them, making them more efficient and profitable for both sides. Suddenly, the economic incentives that had sustained the war vanished overnight. "How did you know?" Vexai asked Martinez during the peace signing ceremony. The human colonel smiled. "Wars aren't really about territory or resources, General. They're about people. Change what people want and you change everything else." Similar transformations occurred throughout the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire found their centuries-old piracy problem solved when human patrol ships appeared in their trade routes. The pirates didn't flee or fight. They simply found other professions after the humans explained very politely that their current career choices were no longer viable. The Galactic Council reconvened 6 months after their declaration of war, but the chamber felt very different now. A simple wooden chair had been added to the circular arrangement of alien seating. It looked modest compared to the crystalline formations and floating pods preferred by other species, but somehow it dominated the room. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in that chair, representing humanity for the first time in over 3,000 years. She wore a simple blue uniform with no decorations except a small patch showing Earth from space. The other council members watched her nervously. In 6 months, humanity had solved more galactic problems than the council had managed in decades. Conflicts that had seemed impossible to resolve simply evaporated when humans became involved. Pirates stopped pirating. Wars ended in negotiated settlements. Plague worlds became healthy and prosperous. It should have been wonderful news. Instead, it terrified them. High Counselor Thane floated forward to address the assembly. 6 months ago, we declared war on humanity, believing them to be a primitive species that posed no threat. We have learned otherwise. Murmurs ran around the chamber. The surviving ships from the invasion fleet had brought back reports that still seemed impossible to believe. The humans have not conquered anyone, Thane continued. They have not demanded tribute or territory. They have not punished us for our aggression. Instead, they have done something far more unsettling. They have begun to help. Ambassador Kethvar's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. Counselor, surely you do not see their assistance as a threat? Chen stood up from her wooden chair. When she spoke, her voice carried easily through the vast chamber without any technological amplification. It was a trick that no other species had mastered, the human ability to make themselves heard. The question before us, she said, is not whether humanity will rejoin galactic civilization. We are already here. The question is what kind of galaxy we will build together. She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of galactic affairs. Trade routes were more secure than they had been in centuries. Border conflicts were being resolved through negotiation instead of warfare. Medical advances were spreading to worlds that had never had access to modern healthcare. For 3,000 years, Chen continued, This galaxy has accepted certain things as inevitable. Pirates would prey on trade ships. Border wars would drag on for decades. Diseases would kill millions while cures existed elsewhere. Entire species would live in poverty while others had more than they needed. The display changed to show projections of what the galaxy could become with continued human involvement. The improvements were staggering. "We remember who we used to be," Chen said, her voice taking on a harder edge. "We remember the old wars, the old conflicts, the old ways of solving problems through violence and conquest. But we also remember why we chose to leave that life behind." Thane floated closer. "What are you saying, Ambassador?" "I'm saying that humanity spent 3,000 years learning to be something more than warriors. We discovered that our greatest strength isn't our ability to destroy enemies, but our ability to make enemies into friends." The chamber fell silent. Every being present understood the implication. "The galaxy can have humanity as enemies," Chen continued. "Warriors who have perfected the art of war over millennia of conflict. Or you can have us as friends, partners who will defend our chosen family against any threat. Solve any problem, heal any wound." She paused, looking around the chamber at representatives of species that had once voted for humanity's extinction. "But understand this. The choice is yours to make, and you will not get another chance. We have tried conquest. We have tried isolation. This time we choose cooperation, but only with those who choose it in return." The vote was called that day. Not on war or peace, that question had already been decided by 6 months of human actions. The vote was on a new proposal, formal readmission of humanity to the Galactic Council, with full membership rights and responsibilities. The result was unanimous. As the session ended, representatives from dozens of species approached Chen to discuss partnership agreements, defense pacts, and cultural exchange programs. The galaxy that had once feared humanity now competed for their attention and assistance. But not everyone was celebrating. In a private chamber aboard the station, a small group of hardline military commanders from various species met in secret. General Vexhai, despite his recent experience with human effectiveness, was among them. "This is worse than conquest," he hissed. "At least conquerors can be fought, resisted, overthrown. But this? They make themselves indispensable. They solve our problems, heal our sick, and our conflicts. Soon we will not be able to imagine the galaxy without them." Admiral Kethvar's crystal form flickered with uncertainty. "Is that necessarily a bad thing, General?" "My people have not known such prosperity in centuries. That is exactly the problem." Vexhai snapped. "They do not rule through fear or force. They rule through making us dependent on their help. And if we ever displease them..." The room fell quiet as the implications sank in, but their fears, while understandable, missed the point entirely. Humanity had not returned to the galaxy to rule or control. They had returned to do what humans had always done best when they weren't consumed by warfare. They had come to build something better. On Earth, children played in parks that had been built over ancient weapons installations. Artists created sculptures from metal that had once been warships. Scientists worked on projects to heal damaged worlds and extend life throughout the galaxy. The 3,000-year truce was over, but it had been replaced by something better, not the peace of exhaustion or fear, but the peace of mutual benefit and shared purpose. High above the planet, in the orbital command center that had once been a fortress, General Webb looked out at the stars with satisfaction. The galaxy was finally learning the lesson that humanity had taken 3,000 years to master. The greatest victory was not defeating your enemies, it was convincing them to become your friends, and for the first time in galactic history, that victory seemed within reach.